are here for another Death and Grief podcast to talk about experiences. We do talk to real people about real experiences in their life. So, if you're in your early stages of grief, this may have some emotional triggering for you. So, listener discretion, viewer discretion is advised. And of course, this is in no way, we're not medical professionals in any way, shape, or form. So this is not a substitute for medical help. So if you need medical assistance, therapy, whatever it is, seek that out. Okay, so today we have Vicky Skinner here. And Vicky Skinner is an author. She's a writer. She also happens to be my daughter, which I'm very proud of. And so she has written these books, and I love them. They are very, very good books. I think this was your first one, How to Breathe Underwater. And then she wrote We Are the Ghosts. And she wrote this one, All Our Worst Ideas. I think this one you said was translated into French. Yeah, so they're really good. Check them out. So she is going to join us today for her experiences. So, Vicky, you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Well, it's funny because I had told you when you were asking about the books and if you could talk about them, I forgot that like one of them is about grief. Like I wrote a book about grief, and I forgot. And that book is actually it's coming out again. It's getting a new title and cover and everything in December. So I'll get to be talking about grief a lot again. But I'm Vicky. I'm 34. I'm an author. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to say really. That's pretty much my entire life in a nutshell is that I write a lot.
So, do you, as a, because of course, as an author, as you know, we're always talking about authors really need to be reading. That is what they really should be doing. Do you like books where people die in them or have sad? I know some people do like sad endings. I personally don't, but
I prefer not to read sad books, but sometimes you just like you gotta read sad books. And of course, characters dying at the end is different from characters dying at the beginning, right? And so like right now, actually, I'm reading Lessons in Chemistry, which I'm way behind everyone else in this. As it was a huge phenomenon like a couple of years ago, and it's about she falls in love and he dies, and so which I don't think is a spoiler. It happens early on in the book, and it is very sad, very, very sad. And I don't enjoy it, but it also feels very important, and I do like that triggering of emotion because emotional connection is important in art, but it is hard for me to get through.
and does it also feel kind of cathartic too to if it's opening like helping you heal and opening wounds and things like that?
Can be. Obviously, it depends on the story and how it's handled. This story in particular is really beautiful because it was like the person who dies is the only person who understood her. The entire world just doesn't get her and she doesn't fit in. And this was like the person who understood her, saw her, respected her, and then he was gone and she's kind of like, I don't know what to do now. And so that's a really interesting, I don't know if it's cathartic as much as it is just like I can connect with that. I can understand that.
Yeah. Wow. Like I said, I personally like I get a lot sad in my life, so I want happy. Okay, let's go ahead and dive into the questions. So, what was your first experience with death?
My first experience with death. Well, you were there. I don't know how old I was. You would probably know better than I would. It was before you and Dad got divorced, so I would have been younger than 9. But it was Uncle Marty who I did not know. So this Uncle Marty is he was my great uncle or my second cousin or something.
Great uncle, so he's grandma's brother.
Okay, and did not know him, had never met him, but we were there for the funeral, and that was when I discovered that I don't like funerals, and it was because of that moment, because I'm sitting at this funeral, there's like a bazillion people there, and I just started crying, like could not hold it in a single moment. I think it was just the like the very sad energy of everyone there. And I just started crying. And I'm like, I don't even know why I'm really crying. Like, I didn't know this man, but I know my family that's there. I don't like funerals because of that, because I cannot, it doesn't matter if it's a person I never met before or if it is my best friend. Like, I can't go to a funeral and not cry and cry and cry because I just get really sad. So that was my first brush with death, I suppose.
Well, I've heard it said that when you yawn, you know how when you yawn and then somebody else yawns too, or when they yawn, you yawn, that that is a sign of someone who is empathetic.
Mm,
And if you yawn in front of somebody and they don't yawn, it's a sign that they're not as empathetic. So I wonder if that's, you're empathic as far as, taking on the energy of other people and taking on the shadows. I do the same thing. It doesn't matter who's in the room. If they're crying, I'm going to cry.
yeah. And I'm not always like that, especially like I don't like to cry in front of people. I don't like to cry in public. And so I'm pretty good at like stealing my emotions if I'm with people, even if they're, being particularly emotional. But like if I'm talking to someone on the phone, and they get emotional, then I might get emotional because I know they can't see me. I do feel that I am very susceptible to high emotion in a room or energy in a room. And so it doesn't really surprise me, that I respond that way, but it's just tough for me.
Well, I also read somewhere because I'm an introvert and people wouldn't think that because of what I do. But as introverts, we get all of our energy from other people. So when we go out and do things with other people, and which I love going out and doing things with other people, but then I get to the point where I just shut down because I'm filled up, I'm full of their energy, and I need to go home. So, you know, being that type of person, we tend to soak up other people's
Hmm.
energy and their emotions.
I just didn't look at like being introverted that way. I always think of it kind of like the other way of like them kind of sucking the energy from me. But I guess that it's like an energy transference. Like it goes both ways. Like they're taking the energy out of you, but you're also like taking in their energy and it can be too much. And so that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, I know I do that because even if I get into a room where somebody's angry,
Mm,
I'll start to get angry.
mm,
If they're complaining or gossiping about it, I tend to start doing that. And I have to be careful about who I'm around or who I'm around a long time with.
mm. Absolutely.
In your own, and if this is a question that's not in the questions, but I forgot to put it in there. But is there a particular person or someone or even a pet that passed that was really hit you hard than any others?
Yes. And
And
it's
you don't have to talk about it if you don't
as I
want
say,
to.
'cause like it's funny. I think I'm all cried out because when you sent me the questions yesterday, I started thinking through everything and cried and cried and cried and cried. And then this morning I cried and cried and cried some more. And it almost makes me feel bad. I know you say it's okay if it's a pet, right? That if it's, that can be just as hard because it is kind of hard to be like, well, yes, my stepfather died, and yes, my grandmother died, and yes, I've lost friends over the years, but my dog was the one that hurt the most. But my dog was the one that hurt the most. It's been 7 years now, and I still like I'll just you're not thinking about it all the time anymore. But then when you do, like you just sometimes have to stop for a second, and I'll just lose it sometimes. And it's just this idea of like, I have to just live the rest of my life without this person that I loved so much. And that's really hard. And so and Jeremy, my husband, is so used to it now that he'll come home and I'll just be like, I'm having a tough Alice day. Like I just can't stop thinking about her and I miss her and I still regularly have dreams where she's still alive or we've moved 1, 2, 3 times since she died. And even still, even though she has never been in this house, she was never in either of our apartments, I would still think that she was gonna like walk in. Like obviously this is where she belongs. So that's that was the one that still sits with me.
And I truly do believe in soulmate dogs, where you have this dog that is it. You know how they say that you take on each other's persona,
Yeah.
and I swear that Raven has taken on my persona because she is just as lazy as I am. And she does some of the stupid things that she does. And Zoe has taken over Ron's persona, and they're just very similar.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that we can have soulmate dogs where, I mean, Ackley had Sissy, and he had had other dogs before, but this one he just connected with, just instantaneous, and she connected with him, and they died in similar fashions, and it was just so weird. But yes, and like I said, it's not the value other people put on it, it's the value we place on it. I deal with people who lose their houses. I deal with people, kids who lose their stuffed animals in a fire, their favorite toys, or things like that. And it's all stuff we have to process. It's all grief. It's all loss.
And a lot of times, especially with pets, it's, people who go, oh, it's just a dog. They're the ones who have kids, right? And so they're prioritizing in their lives, or, they have big families, or they're extroverts, so they have big social circles. But, I have Jeremy now, but when Alice was born and we, had her when I was a teenager, it was just me and it was just her. And then Jeremy came along and we don't have kids, and I've worked from home for the majority of the time for over a decade now. And when you're at home with this other creature all day every day, and they're stuck to your side, and they know everything about you, and and they've been there for all of your ups and downs, and it's just a little different, when that's what you have. You don't have the kids, you don't have all the other stuff, you don't have your big, 9 to 5 that you're gone all the time. And so it's just a little different.
Well, and one of my favorite stories you told me about Alice was, which made me realize how connected she was with you, was that both me and Ackley were out of the house, and like somebody guy was coming, cable guy, internet guy, somebody was coming over, and you were by yourself with Alice, and so you didn't want to be in the house with him, so you decided to step outside the house, and you called one of your friends so that he was on the phone with you. And normally, when Alice would run outside, she would just kind of run in the front yard. But this time, she knew, and she stuck right by your side. She didn't go running around and doing stuff. So she knew at that moment that you needed protection.
Mm. Yeah.
And they just know.
He did. She was my girl.
Because you're a writer, because we're big movie watchers, is there any famous person, celebrity, singer, actor, whose death really hit you hard?
It's funny because going back to that, grief is so weird because of this. And I think you had talked about this a little bit in your last episode, that there's this weird defensiveness around grief, that people are like, oh, you can't be sad because of a celebrity you didn't know. And it's like, but I can, and I am, because that person is also a human being, and that person is also someone who is no longer going to be in the world. So there have been several. I do think that Anton Yelkin was probably the hardest one for me. And I think a lot of that has to do with him being so young. Yeah, he was only a few years older than me when he died. I want to say maybe 4 years older than me at the time. This stupid like freak accident. It's not even like something that you can really comprehend, because we talk about how resilient humans are and whatnot, but at the end of the day, the human body is so fragile. And it's like, how stupid is it that someone can just be gone like that just because of their stupid fragile body? And that sometimes your body is not fragile and sometimes it is. And it was very frustrating. And that was a really tough one. And then the other that kind of sits with me sometimes is Chadwick Boseman. And I think the reason that one hurts a lot is, do you ever just kind of like, why am I still here, but people who could have actually like changed the world and done amazing things and like exacted real change, like they're gone. Like I'm not doing anything. Like I'm just sitting in my house. But then people like Chadwick Boseman were out like fighting racism and, doing good things, and just he was just a really beautiful person who was inspiring other, young black men. And it's like, this doesn't seem right. Like this doesn't seem like it makes any sense. So those are probably the two that I still think about on a regular basis.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Chadwick Boseman was Black Panther.
Yes,
Make sure.
among other things, but yes.
Um, yeah, because it's funny because those are the two also that hit me the hardest, and it was because of Anton Yelkin's age. I think he was like
It was
26,
27, yeah.
27, and I was just telling Ron about him, and of course we're going through the Star Trek movies right now, and then we're of course going through the Marvel movies, and one of my songs on my playlist is the song from Wakanda Forever, which is that, when they play at his funeral, and
Mm-hmm.
every time it comes on I start crying, and I'm like, it's just so weird that they're just here and then they're just gone.
Yeah.
And the good thing about them is that they have this beautiful legacy of their art to leave behind. Like you said, people tend to be a little callous about
Mm-hmm.
celebrities passing. They're like, come on, you didn't know them. But again, it's the way they affected us.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we felt about them.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know her, but Amy Winehouse,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
her death hit me hard because I think because of that she was trying to get clean, and she had a heart attack after she got clean, and it's like, what's going on? And she just left such a beautiful legacy of music behind, and that's all we'll ever get from these people. So we have to cherish what they left.
Yeah, and there's this weird like contradictory nature around artists that it's like we do value what they do so much. I mean, so much so that, these are billion-dollar industries and we rely on our television shows and we rely on our music and all of this stuff. And then, when one of them goes and everyone's like, oh, well, they're just a celebrity. And it's like, but that was somebody who I created an emotional connection with, because when artists create, like they put themselves in what they're creating if they're doing it correctly, and so it's natural to feel that like that emotional connection is now gone. And so it's so weird to me that people get weird about. I'm like, I've spent more time with Chadwick Boseman than I probably have with like several other, most of the humans in the world, and humans in my life, just because I've seen Black Panther so many times. And it's like, of course you're sad that someone is gone. So
And like you said, when they craft their art so well, it affects us. It changes our
mhm,
lives. And I know for me, that is that is what makes me connect with them. That's what makes me love them so much, and I want more of them. And then realizing that we're not going to get more of them, so we have these things, and Black Panther is, you watch that movie, and it's just it it, it just keeps you on the edge of your seat because this guy's not here anymore.
yeah,
Look at what he did.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, ready for the next question?
I knew we were going to end up on tangents because that's what we do.
Yeah, of course. Has there ever been a another thing that some people tend to think is weird? Has there ever been a fictional character that you just love and connected with, and then they passed away or they died in movies, books, or whatever it was?
I'm like, how much time you got? I mean, really, there have been so many that I don't even know that I can necessarily pinpoint one of them and go, oh yeah, this one was worse than all the others. And because I really do try to avoid death in books now, it happens a lot less often. Man, I don't know. I mean, there have truly just been so many that I there's not, I guess, like one necessarily at the front of my mind. I will say that we have a bit of a joke in our household about how often I've had to watch Tobias Menzies' characters die on television. He dies in like everything he does. And I do have a tattoo for his character Frank Randall. And so he's one that I cherish a lot. I have actually his last words to his daughter tattooed on me. But other than that, there have just been so many over the years that I don't know that there's like one very specifically.
Of course, there have been that just immediately come to mind for me that hit me really hard was, of course, the character of the little boy Peter in 19 Seconds by Jodi Picoult.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the little boy that went into the school and shot up the school, and she goes through his history, and it was so traumatic for me that when I just put the book down and just cried and cried and cried and cried. I think the other one that I think angers me more than anything is, and I apologize to Harry Potter fans out there, I can't remember which one it was, Fred or George
It's
that
Fred.
died.
It's Fred that dies. Yeah.
Fred that dies. And of
Yeah.
course, then very angry at J.K. Rowling for doing that because she is God over her books. And why is she, out of all the people, the twin?
Well,
The twin.
and I do think, and it's funny because right before you said that, I was thinking about Remus, because Remus was
Oh,
my
yeah.
absolute favorite Harry Potter character, and it always killed me a little bit that she not only killed him but then killed Tonks too. And so it's like now little Teddy doesn't have parents. Thanks a ton. But yeah, no, for sure. Fred was tough. All of those were tough. Every single Harry Potter death is rough.
Yeah. And of course, you've got, it was 7 books long, and you really connect
Hmm.
with these characters. I mean, so much so that people walk around, they dress like these characters and they act like these characters. They change our lives, and then they get ripped out. I mean, we have enough death in the real world. Why we have to have death in our beautiful fiction books?
I agree. I did just kill someone in a book like 2 days ago, so I don't quite get it. But he's not a minor character. He's just kind of a side character, and it was very sad. He was very young, but it just these things happen.
Oh, great. We're going to have to read that book. I know. I don't think I've Yeah, I have. I've killed characters in my book, but they're bad people. They're bad guys. So who cares?
If you want to read more about grief, you can read We Are the Ghosts, where I kill a character on the first page.
So, was there ever a time in your life when you felt your own death was imminent?
Not in the sense that like I've had a near death experience that I can remember at least. And it's like how doom and gloom do you want to get? I mean,
It's up to you.
as someone who has dealt with depression and suicidal thoughts for the majority of their life, there are many times where I felt like I might be close to death, but I'm still here.
And people, that's something that I don't think we talk enough about either is depression and how people. I mean, I've gotten close to that point where I was like, "Hey, maybe I should do it now. Maybe this is it."
You kind of just go, it would be so easy. Those moments far less often than I used to, but it helps having certain people in your mind all the time to just remember, because what happens obviously with depression and suicidal thoughts is that your mental health convinces you that no one will miss you and that everyone will actually be better off if you're gone. There have been times in my life where I felt like a really big burden and just went, but everyone will be so much happier. And so, but there are certain people in my life that when it's rough, then I just go, okay, but I know that my mom
I'm
would,
getting teary
yeah,
eyed right now. Look at me.
that my mom wouldn't be okay and that my best friend wouldn't be okay. And if roles were reversed, if my mom did that or if my best friend did that, that's not something I would ever come back from. So why would I think that and so you have to kind of like coach yourself through these moments that voice can get really loud going, but it'll just be easier for everybody. You'll just be out of the way and everyone can move on with their lives and their lives will be better, and it can get really scary in that place. So,
It is a very dark place. And it's definitely a place of lies, because like you think you won't be missed, you think everybody would be better off without you, and even even the people, I mean, my one of my best friends killed himself, and he had like literally two friends in his life, me and this girl he worked with, and that was it. And he didn't think he had anything to live for, and so he killed himself, and of course that has severely affected me, and he didn't even realize how much, because he would come over, and that affected you and Jeremy
hmm,
because you
absolutely.
knew him.
Yeah, no, I loved her.
And yeah, and it saddens me that Ron will never get to meet him.
Yeah.
There are people that knew him, that wanted him around, but he just didn't see that. Being in that dark place, hearing those lies, and I know that tends to run in our family. Depression runs in our family, and sometimes you just have to remember that you have those certain people that will, even if it's just one person, your life is not your own. Even though, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it is your life. It's your choice to do things. But when you start having relationships, when you get married, when you have kids, you owe them a piece of you. That's just kind of an unspoken thing. Especially being a parent, one of the movies I love is Ricky and the Flash. And it's Meryl Streep and Rick Springfield. And she ran away from her family and kids to have this music career. And Rick Springfield also has a son that he tries to keep in contact with, and he sends him birthday cards and Christmas cards and never gets a response, but he continues to do it. And Meryl Streep says, they're supposed to love me. Rick Springfield said, no. He said, it is your job to love them.
Mhm.
It's not their job to love you. That really hit home with me, because we do, as a parent, we make an unspoken promise to our children to care for them, to watch out for them, to protect them, to feed them, to always be there for them. Babies don't make a promise to us when they're born. Kids don't make promises to us, but we make unspoken promises to our kids. And so our lives are not our own anymore. So what do you believe happens after we die?
I mean, in a very simplified Christian viewpoint, I believe in heaven and hell. In terms of timelines, whether it's as simple as that, I know that there are people who kind of think that at the moment of death, it's already determined, where you're going and what's going to happen. I like to think that there's going to be a conversation between us and God after, where, whatever that looks like and whatever happens there. And this is all just kind of in my own head. This is not biblical in any way. There's no evidence of this in any way because there can't be. But I had this nice image in my head of us getting to sort of plead our case one last time. But it's more of just a romantic notion more than anything based on any kind of scientific fact. I don't really know the specifics. I just know that there is a heaven and there is a hell, and that's all I know.
And you're right. Even though we have been taught since we were little that once death is there, once you hit death, that's it. There's no more chances. But God told me once, he said, how do you know?
I don't know.
You haven't been to the other side. These are my children. I love you. You don't know what I do with them after they die if I give them one last chance. I don't necessarily believe in purgatory and working your way to heaven,
Right.
but we don't know what happens after we die. How would you like people to remember you
I would like people to remember me as someone who made them laugh and as someone who gave good advice and honestly just someone who loved them, whoever that person is that's thinking about me. I want them to know that I love them because I love everybody that I come into contact with. And I like to think that I'm full of love and that I have plenty to spare and that I keep a positive atmosphere. I know I'm at times kind of a negative person and I am also at times a very angry person, but when it comes down to like the base, the core of me, I like to think that I am loving and accepting, and so that's what I would hope that people would remember, and that maybe that I worked hard to to try and get somewhere in my life.
Well, good thing is that we have these also to remember you by.
Lots of them.
Yes. So, in your times of grieving, was there anyone that ever did something or said something to you that made you feel especially comforted?
Because I'm not very good at grieving in front of people, I don't guess I really have a ton of experiences with people comforting me because they probably didn't know that I needed comforting. But one thing is, Jeremy, my lovely husband, who is actually had training in bereavement and whatnot, and so is very good at handling people who grieve and is very kind. He's just very good at giving space for me to feel sad. Like I remember exactly where I was when I found out that Anton Yelkin died, is that we were in our dining room at our old house, and I was just like, no, like that, no, like this person is still like a child to me. Like, he's just a kid. Like that's not real. He can't have died. And Jeremy was like, kind of the opposite of what we were talking about, that people kind of get weird and are like, oh, you didn't know them. Jeremy was like, it's okay to be sad about this person that you didn't really know because they were a person. And that stuck with me because it was like I had spent so much of my life, as a writer and as just a person who kind of connects, maybe more than the average person with fictional characters or with actors or with singers, or, I'm an introvert, and so a lot of my emotional connections are from afar, whether it's people in my real life or people outside of it. And so I've spent a lot of time with people going, this is a silly thing to be sad about, or this is a silly thing to be emotional about, or this is a silly thing to be excited about, and kind of my whole life, even now. But to just have one person who says, no, it's okay. Like, it's fine for you to be sad about this thing. Like, be sad about whatever you need to be sad about. And then I remember later when we lost Alice, we took her, you were there, we took her to be put down, and we got home, and kind of throughout the day it actually was like, it's going to sound so strange, but it actually was a really lovely day, in that we went home and we like showered, and then we went for a hike at my favorite hiking spot, and then we went out for a nice lunch, and it was just kind of this very like peaceful time. But I'd be like, okay, like I feel okay. And a lot of it just had to do with the fact that Alice was in a lot of pain at the end. She had stopped eating. She had like bone spurs in her spine. So, and her, her liver was failing. And so she was really miserable. And so it's that piece of like, she's okay. Like, we don't have to, there's not this fear all the time anymore of, is she just going to die, at some point while we're asleep or while we're gone or whatever. And so I was feeling kind of at peace with the fact that, like, okay, it's over, it's done. But then I'd be like just kind of going along, and then just kind of walk over to Jeremy, and he just like open his arms, and I just like cry and cry and cry. And that happened like several times over the that day and probably that week. And so it's just nice to have someone who kind of gives you the space to be sad. There have been a, because I when I was, thinking about your questions, I was kind of realizing that in a way it doesn't feel like I've had like a big loss yet, and like, which I know is, again, it's a very strange thing to say as someone who lost their stepfather 2 years ago. But, me and Ackley weren't terribly close. We were close in proximity for the majority of my life, but we didn't really understand each other. We didn't really connect on like an emotional level. And so while I was very sad to lose him, it was just a different kind of sad. And so I was kind of like looking at all of these people throughout my life that have died, and the range of like grief is so weird that like I can be like less sad about someone I knew more and more sad about someone that I knew less, and all of this stuff. But very much so, if you haven't had that like big death, people kind of do minimize your grief. Like, I lost a friend in 2016 who is one of the reasons that I wrote that book, We Are the Ghosts. And I considered her my friend, but a mutual friend had introduced us, and so she was really that friend's friend before. And that friend, who and who was not a very kind person and not a very understanding person, if I showed any kind of sadness over this friend being lost, she would go, "Well, you don't get to be sad. Like, she was my friend. I'm sad." And her father, who was also, involved in their friendship, if he was sad, she would get so mad because she was like, "You don't get to be sad because you were awful to this person," or whatever. And so it's just this idea of like who's allowed to grieve is so silly. I've dealt with those kinds of weird situations where I don't feel like I'm allowed to grieve for one reason or another. And so then to have a person who just goes, it doesn't matter why you're grieving, who you're grieving for, what the situation was, how well you knew them, whether it was like a big death or not, just like be sad if you need to be sad, and that's okay. So that was really important to have.
Yes. And I think that because if we have some grief in our life that we haven't dealt with, and then someone else dies that you're not close to, it can open up those old wounds.
Yep.
I know that Beth and Livy, my grandchildren, were lost their grandfather, their father's father, and they were close with him. And so they took that really hard. And although they weren't close with Ackley, who was their step grandfather, when he died, it opened up those old wounds. And they started having nightmares again and started having to go through all of that. So it doesn't. I remember when one of my friends from Meadowview, her daughter got hit by a car, and I just started crying. I remember her. I taught her as a child, but I wasn't especially close with her. But for some reason, it just must have opened some old wound because I just started. And she survived. She lived. Thank you, Lord. But we didn't know if she was going to, and it really hit me hard. So you never know where those triggers are going to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and like you said, for somebody to say you're not allowed to grieve, whatever.
If you want to know what emotional abuse looks like, there it is.
Right, yes. So if today were your last day, what would you do with it?
I think I would want like my people, like to just spend the day with my people, those people who I always think about like when a dog feels safe with you, they like fully fall asleep, whereas if they don't feel safe, then they'll sleep with kind of one eye open where like, anything will jar them because they're not fully asleep. That's kind of how I am with people, where it's like there are people who I'm like I'm comfortable, I'm good, I'm safe. I would have those people. So like you guys, my parents, my best friends, Megan and Chris, and then Jeremy. Like I'd probably just be like, okay, guys, come over and we're gonna like watch a movie and we're gonna like eat pizza and we're gonna talk and we're just gonna chill. And that would probably be like my ideal day. Yeah.
Would you want us to know it was your last day if we didn't know?
Um, I mean, I think so because like I would want to say anything that I needed to say. And I would want them to feel like they could say anything that they needed to say. I'm not a fan of like the what is it like the Irish exit, I where you don't say goodbye to anybody and you just leave. Um and
Oh, I don't
you've
know
never heard
that.
that. And so, I don't want to pull the Michael Scott and leave the day before they say they're going to leave. I'm not that person. I want to say I love you one more time and hug everybody one more time, and because I think of, not to again go off on kind of a tangent, but like people that I've lost that I go, I wish I could have said I love you one more time. I wish I could have hugged them one more time. One memory that I have that I hold very dear is that, so in like 2020, from 2020 into like 2021, I lost like 7 people. And the very first one that I lost was my friend Karen, who I knew for a couple of years, and she died very suddenly of a heart attack. And right before lockdown, the very last like social thing that I did was I went to a book festival where she was one of the presenters. And me, like I'm not like a get up in a crowd, like center of attention kind of person at all. But we went into this hall and I was with my best friend Megan and my boss at the time, Dawn. And I didn't even know that Karen was going to be there. It was just kind of, she did a lot of events. She was a professional. She had a new book out, so she was very busy. And I was like, oh my gosh, Karen's here. And we're sitting way in the back and there's a room full of people and she's up on a stage and they weren't quite ready yet. They were still kind of like setting up chairs and stuff and trying to like get sorted. And this voice was like, go say hi to Karen. And I'm like, like, like everyone's gonna see me, like I've got to go up there and like be in front of everybody. But I was like, I'm not gonna get a chance to talk to her again for the rest of the day because she's gonna be busy. So I'll hop up there and say hi to her. And I went up and I hugged her and she just, how are you? Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. And 2 months later she was gone. And so I'm always just really happy that I hugged her one more time because you don't get to do that very often. And so I'm glad that I got to do that. And so I would want that if I had the option.
Okay, wow. Well, that is all the questions I have. Is there any last words, anything else you would like to say?
Maybe not. I mean, not anything that I've said already, that grief is just so weird. Like I know that people want to like fit it into like a table of, your steps, and I'm not saying that the steps are not real, that the stages of grief. I'm not saying that at all, but even just within those stages, grieving can look so different to everybody. One thing that I've always found really frustrating is the expectation around grief. Like, have you cried? Like, the funeral is important. And it's like, well, those things are important to some people. As someone who deeply hates funerals, I don't need a funeral to move on. I don't need a funeral to get closure. I know that some people do, and that's very important for them. And the problem isn't the disparity there, it's the expectation of, if you didn't go to the funeral, you disrespected someone, or if you didn't go to the funeral, you that was rude, or whatever. And like some people need to grieve in private, some people need to not grieve in front of an audience. And again, not trying to criticize funerals in any way, it's just that it's just difficult to hear all the time, when I don't want to go to a funeral. Well, what do you mean you're not going to go to the funeral? And it's like, well, funerals are hard for me, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because in our culture, it's very much expected. And it's the same as like, crying with people. If you don't open up and cry in front of people, then you're some kind of robot. And it's like, no, I just prefer to do that in private. But you don't get to grieve in private. Everyone wants you to grieve in public where everybody can see it happening. And I feel that that's very unfair. And so I do think grief has to look however it's going to look for you. And also this idea that like you're going to grieve and then you're going to be done, which has never been my experience for myself or for anybody that I know. It's always this, it's kind of almost like a tapering off. Like, when you first lose someone, you're sad every single second of every day, and then maybe you're just sad for a little bit every day, and then maybe you're only sad a couple times a week, and then, eventually life moves on, and that's fine, but there are still going to be moments down the road where you're just going to go, oh my God, Alice is gone. And you're just gonna start crying. And it's been 7 years, and you're gonna cry until you make yourself sick. And like, that's okay. And like, that's normal. Like, it's never really fully gonna go away. My lovely best friend has gone through losing her soulmate pet last year, Chip, who we all loved so much and was the sweetest little kitty. And she kind of had discovered that she didn't maybe had take the time to process it because she was busy. Life immediately changed, and she's going through that right now where it's like, well, it's been over a year and she's moved on and they've got two new kitties who they love, and she's got a new job and she's so busy, she's doing the thing, and then she'll voice memo me crying because she's like, it just hit me again today and it just really hurts a lot today. And it's like, that's normal and that might just be forever. And you gotta just like be kind to yourself and not go, this is dumb that I'm still affected by it. You just no, just feel what you need to feel, and be upset about what you need to be upset about.
Right. Yeah, and people tend to be okay with your grief as long as you do it in the way they think you should in their time frames. And like you said, then they expect you at a certain time. When they move on with their life, they expect you to move on with your life. It's not the way that grief works.
Even when you look like you've moved on, for the most part, you've got it's like, you look at you like you've got a husband and a new home, and all of this stuff that has happened, and everyone goes, oh, look at her, like she's doing really well, and you are doing really well, but that doesn't cancel out bad things that have happened. It doesn't cancel out sadness. It just means that there are new things to be happy about. But that is very strange. I feel very fortunate to have never had that conversation of like, are you over it yet? Because I've heard from other people who have grieved like big losses, and people are like, is that still hard for you? And like, I'm lucky to have never had someone ask me that, because I think I would lose my mind. I have had, well, and what I will say also is that grief does, and I think you touched on this too, grief is not always about death. Grief can come with other things. And the other big thing that I wrote about in that book was just a relationship that ended, that was a big, very important relationship. And that was, geez, that was in 2013. So it's been 12 years, and I still cry about that. And that person is still alive. That person is still in a roundabout way in my life, but what we had is gone. And I still grieve about that and all the time. And I do have people in my life who go, are you still upset about that? Like, can't you just get over it? Can't you just like be friends with that person again? Can't you just have a relationship with that person again? Can't you just forgive that person who's never asked you for forgiveness? And no. Like, and there is no getting over, even if things were repaired, that sadness doesn't go away because it doesn't erase the thing that happened. And so some grief just never goes away, and you don't get over it, and that's okay. You just move on, and it can still be sad.
Yeah, and people don't realize how much of a wound grief is, a loss of something is. And if you think about a physical wound, if you've been stabbed in the chest, and after a week people are like, "Are you still hurting from that stab wound?" Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. And you'll always hurt from it, and there will be scars and there will be pain when you move a certain way. It's just the way that our body works. And that's the same way with grief. Our hearts are wounded, our souls are wounded, and you just don't get over it.
Yep.
I read in the Bible when, because it says in the Bible, and they grieved for 30 days, and then they got married, and then they did this,
Yeah.
and then I was like,
The, like, grieving
30 days?
period. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in like medieval times, I could be totally like wrong about this and sound really stupid, but I think that, you like a widow mourned for like a year or something like that. She like wore black and she wasn't allowed to remarry for that year or whatever. And it's like, this is the approved amount of grieving time. Now you are ready to go back on the market and marry someone else. It's so silly.
Man, society. Well, thank you so very much
Yeah.
for your time. It's been so much fun, and I guess that's it. It feels really weird to just end it, but like I said, so if you're out there, look for these books. She said this one's being no, it's We Are the Ghost is being re-released under a different name.
Yeah, it's gonna be called Us Without You, and I believe it's coming out
Oh,
in December.
okay. Well, we gotta look for that one. Because this is I know the relationship she was talking about in this one. That's why I cried because it hit me hard. But these are also very good books, so catch those. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I guess I will talk to you later.
Okay, thanks for
Thanks for
having
joining
me.
us.
Yeah.
Oh, real quick before, I'm sorry, let me say to the audience out there, got some great more people that we're going to be interviewing soon, and we're Christians, and one of the people that I'm going to be interviewing is our pastor, and he's going to be looking at death in regards to what the Bible says. So if there's anyone out there who is of a different religion who would like to talk about death and what happens after we die, I would love to interview you. That would be fantastic. I also have an ebook coming out soon about death, pre-death, what happens before, what you need to do before, funeral stuff, and then post-death stuff. All right, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Bye.